You ever wondered what really happens when a narcissist pushes an empath too far? At first, the empath appears gentle, forgiving, always giving second chances, and quietly enduring the storm. But here's the twist most narcissists never see coming. When that kindness is pushed beyond its limits, something shifts inside the empath. The quiet listener becomes the loud truth teller. The giver turns into someone who finally takes their power back. And the one who once absorbed all the pain now becomes the very force that shatters the narcissist's control. This is the moment the tables turn, and the predator suddenly finds themselves powerless against the very person they thought was weak. What makes this shift so powerful? And why does it always become the narcissist's ultimate defeat? Stay with me until the end, because I promise you'll see a side of the empath that most people never talk about. And if this message speaks to your soul, don't just watch silently. Leave a comment with your thoughts, or subscribe so you never miss these deep truths that most people keep hidden. There comes a time in every empath's life when the endless cycle of giving, forgiving, and absorbing another person's storms reaches its natural limit, and this is what we call the breaking point. At first, the empath does not even recognize the weight they are carrying, because compassion is their natural state, and loving deeply feels like breathing to them. They understand pain, they sense wounds, they feel what others cannot put into words, and so they step in quietly to soothe, to heal, and to fix. But when entangled with a narcissist, this compassion becomes their greatest trap, because every effort to help is met not with gratitude but with exploitation. Every act of love is twisted into fuel for control, and every second chance is turned into a weapon against them. Day after day, the empath absorbs the criticism, the gaslighting, the silent treatments, and the unspoken expectation that their needs do not matter. They carry the unbalanced weight of the relationship, believing for a while that maybe, just maybe, their love will heal the narcissist. But the truth is harsh. The narcissist does not want healing. They want dominance. They want an endless supply of energy, validation, and sacrifice, and they believe the empath will never break. Yet, what narcissists fail to understand is that the very depth of an empath's heart is what makes their breaking point so powerful. Because when that moment finally comes, it is not sudden rage or empty threats. It is a quiet but irreversible shift, a deep realization that enough is enough. The empath begins to see clearly, as though a fog has lifted. They start connecting dots they once ignored, recognizing patterns they once excused, and hearing the lies in places where they once only gave benefit of the doubt. This awakening is painful, because it means accepting that the love they poured out so selflessly will never be returned, but it is also liberating, because it marks the birth of an entirely new kind of strength. A strength born not from anger, but from clarity. A strength that does not need to scream to be heard, because it resonates from deep within the soul. This breaking point is where the empath no longer seeks to change the narcissist, but instead chooses to protect themselves, their peace, and their energy. They begin to set boundaries, not as walls of fear but as shields of dignity. They stop apologizing for things that are not their fault. They stop explaining themselves to ears that were never listening. And most importantly, they stop allowing their kindness to be mistaken for weakness. The narcissist, used to an endless supply of patience and forgiveness, suddenly find themselves standing before a mirror they cannot control. For the first time, the empath refuses to play the game. They refuse to bend under manipulation, and they refuse to give the reaction the narcissist craves. This is the moment where the roles silently shift. The narcissist feels powerless, while the empath stands taller than ever before. And what is remarkable is that the empath does not even need revenge, because their very act of breaking free is the greatest defeat the narcissist can experience. Narcissists thrive on control, on being the center of another's emotional universe, and when the empath cuts that cord, their entire illusion begins to crumble. The empath, on the other hand, discovers a strength they never knew existed. They learn that their sensitivity is not a curse but a gift, that their compassion is not weakness but a form of wisdom, and that their ability to feel deeply is exactly what fuels their resilience. The breaking point is not the end of the empath. It is the beginning of their transformation. It is the moment they stop living for someone else's approval and start living for their own truth. Yes, they may carry scars, but those scars are not signs of defeat. They are proof of survival, proof that they endured the storm and came out stronger. And as the empath rises, the narcissist is left in shock, because the one person they believed they had broken beyond repair is the very person who now walks away whole. This shift is the ultimate irony. The narcissist pushes and pushes, thinking the empath will always stay, but in doing so, they awaken a strength that ensures the empath will never return. The breaking point becomes a doorway, a passage from being a silent victim to becoming a powerful survivor, and in that transformation lies the ultimate defeat of the narcissist. For when the empath learns their worth, when they reclaim their voice, when they stand rooted in their own truth, there is no manipulation strong enough to pull them back. What once drained them now fuels them. What once silenced them now empowers them. And what once held them captive now sets them free. The breaking point of an empath is not just an ending. It is the moment a quiet soul discovers the unshakable strength that was within them all along. For so long, the empath remains silent, quietly watching, quietly absorbing, quietly piecing together the hidden motives that others often miss. They notice the subtle shifts in tone, the carefully crafted lies, the manipulations designed to twist reality into the narcissist's favor. They catch the way words never quite match actions, the way apologies feel rehearsed, the way affection is used like bait, only dangled when control seems to slip. The empath is an observer by nature, one who sees with both eyes and heart, one who understands unspoken pain, and one who gives more chances than most would ever dare. But silence does not mean ignorance. While the narcissist believes they are fooling everyone, the empath has been keeping record, internally noting the gaslighting, remembering the contradictions, and feeling every fracture in the false mask. And then, there comes a day when the empath decides that silence is no longer protection but a prison. The moment they speak, everything changes. Their voice, long suppressed, carries a weight that strikes straight at the core of the narcissist's illusion. Because when the empath begins to name the tactics, when they start putting words to the games, the narcissist's carefully built house of control starts to shake. Exposure is the one thing a narcissist fears most, because their power lives in shadows and silence. They rely on confusion, on doubt, on keeping their victim too weary or too scared to ever speak the truth. But once the empath chooses to vocalize what they've seen, the lies no longer hold the same power. The narcissist scrambles, desperate to rewrite the story. But the empath's voice has already pierced the illusion. And it is not always loud or angry. It is calm, direct, undeniable, a mirror that reflects every hidden scheme. This is why the narcissist loses control, because suddenly they are no longer the one telling the story. The narrative shifts, the mask slips, and the truth they worked so hard to bury begins to surface. For the empath, finding their voice is not just about speaking to the narcissist, it is about reclaiming their place in the world. It is about saying, I see you, I understand you, and I will no longer be silent. That declaration, that courage to vocalize the unseen, is what dismantles the narcissist's grip. It is a turning point where the observer becomes the truth teller, where silence turns into strength, and where the one who once absorbed every wound now begins to heal by speaking. And once the empath speaks, nothing is the same again, for them, or for the narcissist who can no longer control the script. Compassion is the empath's greatest gift, but it is also the very reason they endure so much for so long. They see the broken child hidden inside the narcissist, the wounded soul beneath the arrogance, the quiet fear beneath the rage. Out of love and hope, they tell themselves, if I just give a little more, forgive a little more, maybe they will finally change. And for a while, that belief keeps them tethered, pouring light into a void that only grows darker. But compassion, when stretched beyond its limits, begins to transform. It shifts into clarity. The empath begins to see that what they mistook for wounds in need of healing are actually patterns of manipulation designed to keep them bound. They realize that their endless tolerance has not softened the narcissist's heart, but instead has fueled their appetite for control. This is the moment when illusions collapse. The mask falls, the excuses no longer hold weight, and the empath finally sees the truth, that love cannot grow where there is no respect, and healing cannot happen where there is no accountability. This shift from compassion to clarity does not make the empath cold or bitter. Instead, it makes them wise. It sharpens their vision and reminds them that compassion must also be directed inward, that they too are worthy of kindness, patience, and love. And when the empath begins to apply that compassion to themselves, the narcissist loses their strongest weapon, because the empath no longer tolerates what once kept them trapped. Clarity is power. It is the moment the empath realizes they were never weak for caring, but they would be weak for continuing to ignore the truth. And once they see it, they cannot unsee it. The illusions collapse, the tolerance ends, and the empath begins to walk a new path, one where their compassion is no longer wasted on someone who refuses to change, but instead redirected to those who truly value it. That moment of clarity is when the narcissist's hold shatters, because the empath is no longer blind, no longer bound, and no longer willing to play the role the narcissist wrote for them. For a narcissist, control is not just about words or actions, it is about energy. They feed on attention, on emotional reactions, on the steady flow of validation that reassures them they are powerful, important, and in charge. This is why they target empaths, because empaths give endlessly, pouring out understanding, compassion, and emotional energy without hesitation. To a narcissist, an empath is the perfect supply, someone who not only notices their pain but also takes responsibility for soothing it. But here lies the turning point, the moment the empath chooses to withdraw. It does not always come with drama, shouting, or confrontation. More often, it is quiet, subtle, almost invisible from the outside. The empath simply stops feeding the fire. They stop defending themselves against lies. They stop reacting to insults. They stop chasing after crumbs of affection. Instead, they step back, reclaiming their energy for themselves. And for the narcissist, this feels like suffocation. The outbursts lose their power when no one is absorbing them. The guilt trips fall flat when no one is carrying the blame. The manipulations crumble when no one reacts. Slowly, the narcissist begins to starve, because without emotional supply, their carefully constructed world starts collapsing. And here's the irony. The empath doesn't need revenge. They don't even need to fight. Their silence and withdrawal are louder than any confrontation could ever be. It is not indifference, but a conscious act of self-preservation, a refusal to be drained any longer. The narcissist, who once believed they held total control, suddenly realizes they were never the source of power. The empath was. And when that supply is gone, they are left face to face with their own emptiness, a reality they cannot escape. This is the true power of emotional withdrawal. The empath does not just survive, they rise, while the narcissist withers without the energy they once stole so freely. There comes a point in an empath's journey where survival demands something they once struggled to embrace, the creation of firm, unshakable boundaries. For so long, the empath has been an open door, welcoming, forgiving, endlessly understanding, a soft place for others to land no matter how heavy or destructive their storms may be. But that very openness is what makes them so vulnerable to narcissists, who see not kindness but opportunity, not generosity but weakness to be exploited. The empath learns, often through painful lessons, that without boundaries, their light is not cherished but consumed, their love is not reciprocated but drained, and their patience is not respected but trampled. Boundaries, then, become more than lines drawn in the sand. They become lifelines, sacred markers of dignity, self-respect, and survival. At first, setting them feels unnatural, even harsh, because the empath's instinct is to give rather than refuse, to help rather than say no, to bend rather than risk conflict. But with every betrayal, every manipulation, every sleepless night spent wondering why their love was never enough, the empath begins to realize that boundaries are not walls meant to keep love out. They are shields meant to protect love, especially the love they must give to themselves. And when those boundaries are finally put in place, something extraordinary happens. The narcissist loses their grip. The very tactics that once worked so effortlessly, guilt trips, gaslighting, playing the victim, suddenly meet a wall they cannot penetrate. The empath, once predictable in their endless forgiveness, now becomes unpredictable in their refusal to tolerate mistreatment. They no longer rush to explain themselves when accused of things they did not do. They no longer allow silence treatments to dictate their peace. They no longer sacrifice their values just to keep the peace that was never real in the first place. These boundaries burn bridges, not because the empath has turned cold, but because they have chosen truth over illusion, self-worth over self-sacrifice. And once the bridge between them and the narcissist is burned, there is no going back. The narcissist, stripped of access to the empath's energy, faces a reality they cannot accept, that their control was never real power, but borrowed power, given freely by someone who finally decided to take it back. For the empath, this transformation is life-changing. Boundaries turn them from a silent sufferer into a force of strength, from someone easily manipulated into someone untouchable. The same heart that once bent until it broke now stands firm, refusing to shrink for the comfort of others. And this is not cruelty. It is clarity. It is the realization that love without boundaries is not love but self-destruction, and that true compassion begins with protecting the self. The narcissist may rage, they may slander, they may attempt every trick in their arsenal to regain control, but it is too late. The empath has tasted the freedom of living within their own truth, and there is no manipulative pull strong enough to drag them back into chains. Boundaries change the entire dynamic, because they shift the balance of power. The narcissist can no longer dictate the terms of reality. The empath now dictates the terms of engagement. And often, those terms are simple: respect me, or lose me. This shift is what terrifies the narcissist most, because it exposes their greatest fear, that without control over another, they have nothing. The empath, on the other hand, emerges not bitter but wiser, not closed off but discerning, finally able to give their compassion to those who value it instead of those who exploit it. Boundaries burn bridges, yes, but only the bridges that were leading the empath into fire. What remains is solid ground, a new foundation where they can build a life rooted in self-love, balance, and freedom. And as they walk forward, leaving behind the ashes of manipulation, the empath discovers a truth that changes everything. Their strength was never in their silence or their sacrifice, but in their ability to finally say, no more. There is a hidden truth about empaths that few people ever see. A truth even the empath themselves may not recognize until the moment arrives, and that truth is the existence of an unexpected warrior within. For much of their lives, empaths are known as the peacemakers, the healers, the ones who listen without judgment and love without condition. Their nature is soft, their hearts wide open, their energy attuned to the needs of others in ways that seem almost supernatural. They do not seek conflict, they do not desire control, and they do not thrive on power struggles, because to them, harmony is far more valuable than dominance. But this gentle nature, when placed in the hands of a narcissist, is taken as weakness, a signal that they can be used, drained, and pushed beyond reason. The narcissist mistakes patience for passivity, compassion for compliance, and silence for surrender. And so they keep pushing, testing limits, tightening control, and taking more than they ever give, believing that the empath will never fight back. But every human soul has its limits, even the most forgiving heart. And when an empath is pushed too far, something extraordinary awakens inside them. The quiet strength that once kept them enduring now becomes a force of resistance. It is not loud, it is not chaotic, and it is not fueled by the narcissist's same hunger for control. Instead, it is calm, steady, and unshakable, like the earth itself refusing to be moved. This transformation often shocks the narcissist, because they never saw it coming. They believed the empath's softness was permanent, that their giving spirit meant eternal compliance. But what they overlooked was that the empath's power was never in aggression. It was in depth. And when that depth is turned inward, When the empath finally realizes their energy must be used to protect themselves instead of saving the one who is destroying them, the warrior within rises. It is not about revenge or cruelty, but about survival, dignity, and truth. The empath begins to resist not by shouting louder, but by standing firmer. They refuse to play the games. They no longer bend under manipulation. They no longer seek approval from someone who offers none. They no longer explain themselves to ears that twist their words. Their resistance is quiet but undeniable, a wall the narcissist cannot climb, a strength that cannot be manipulated. And this quiet strength terrifies the narcissist, because it exposes their greatest weakness. They cannot control someone who is no longer willing to engage. The empath, once predictable in their endless giving, now becomes unpredictable in their refusal to give at all. This is the warrior within, an energy of self-respect, of courage, of boundaries drawn in stone. It is the moment the empath decides that their own soul is worth fighting for, and that their peace is more important than the chaos they once endured. And while the narcissist may try every trick in their arsenal to break it down, rage, guilt, smear campaigns, even desperate affection, the warrior does not fall. Because once the empath is awakened, once they have seen their own power, they cannot unsee it. They understand that their quiet strength is not weakness but the very thing that saves them. They realize that protecting their heart does not make them cold, it makes them wise. And they discover that true power does not come from controlling others but from mastering themselves. This unexpected warrior within is not built from anger but from clarity, not from hate but from love of self. It is forged in fire, shaped by pain, and made unbreakable by survival. And as the empath walks forward with this new strength, the narcissist is left stunned, because the very person they thought would always bow down has now risen higher than they ever imagined. The empath's warrior spirit is not loud, but it is final. It marks the end of exploitation, the end of illusions, and the end of being anyone's supply. From that moment on, the empath's life is never the same, because they carry with them an unshakable truth, that their softness was never weakness. It was the birthplace of a warrior they never knew they had inside. Behind the grand mask of confidence, behind the sharp tongue, the manipulation, and the endless need for control, lies the very thing a narcissist works hardest to hide, their fragility. This is their greatest secret, the one they will do anything to protect, because their entire persona is built on covering the truth that deep down, they are insecure, hollow, and terrified of being exposed. For a long time, the empath plays along unknowingly, believing the mask, feeling sorry for the wounds the narcissist hints at, and even trying to be the healer for the fragile soul they sense beneath the bravado. But there comes a moment when the empath begins to see clearly, when the fog of manipulation lifts, and their eyes finally rest not on the image the narcissist projects, but on the truth they conceal. And when the empath begins to speak this truth aloud, the narcissist's world starts to shake. Because truth-telling is like light in a dark room. It reveals what was always there, but unseen. The empath starts to point out the contradictions, the false stories, the cruel patterns, and the ways the narcissist twists reality. They may do it calmly, softly even, but the impact is seismic. The narcissist, who relies on silence and compliance, suddenly finds themselves standing before a mirror they cannot shatter. And in that mirror, their fragility is exposed for what it is: fear of abandonment, fear of irrelevance, fear of being unmasked as ordinary. This exposure terrifies them more than any confrontation ever could, because narcissists thrive on illusion, and the empath's truth destroys illusion in an instant. The empath does not need to shout. Their words carry weight because they are grounded in lived experience, in clarity, in undeniable reality. And here's where the tables turn. The narcissist, who once seemed so powerful, so untouchable, now stands vulnerable, trembling under the weight of a truth they cannot deny. Their anger, their rage, their attempts to gaslight only make the truth clearer, because the empath now sees the fragility beneath every outburst. The empath realizes that what they mistook for strength was always a mask, that what they endured as cruelty was actually a desperate attempt to hide weakness, and that behind the facade of superiority lies a fragile ego that cannot withstand exposure. And so, with every truth the empath speaks, the narcissist's power fades. Their control weakens. Their carefully built house of cards begins to collapse. For the empath, this is not about revenge, it is about liberation. It is the moment they step out of the shadows of confusion and stand firmly in the light of reality. And for the narcissist, it is devastation, because nothing destroys their illusion faster than truth. The empath, once silenced, now becomes the voice that unmasks the game entirely. And that voice, steady and fearless, is the one thing the narcissist cannot control. To be exposed is to be defeated. And in that defeat, the empath discovers just how fragile the giant really was all along. For so long, the empath's story feels like one of victimhood, absorbing blame that was never theirs, carrying weight that did not belong to them, and giving love to someone who only turned it into fuel for control. They move through days confused, drained, and questioning their own worth, caught in the cycle of gaslighting and manipulation that convinces them they are the problem. The narcissist thrives in this dynamic, feeding on the empath's silence, taking comfort in their compliance, and believing that this power will last forever. But victimhood is not the empath's final identity. It is only a chapter, and eventually, a shift occurs, often quietly at first, but with the power of a storm gathering strength. The empath begins to see clearly, to connect the dots, and to realize that every tactic used against them was designed to weaken their spirit. And in that clarity, something extraordinary awakens, the realization that they were never weak, only misled, and that the very sensitivity the narcissist mocked is their greatest weapon. This is where the shift from victim to victor begins. The empath starts reclaiming their power piece by piece, no longer reacting to every insult, no longer absorbing every projection, and no longer giving their energy away freely. They begin to stand in their truth, setting boundaries that cannot be crossed, choosing silence where arguments once drained them, and choosing distance where closeness once suffocated them. With every step, they take back the power the narcissist thought was theirs to own. And here lies the greatest irony. The narcissist believed they had control, but in reality, their entire dominance depended on the empath's willingness to give it away. Once that willingness ends, so does the narcissist's illusion of power. The empath transforms, not into someone cold or hardened, but into someone wise, someone grounded, someone who knows their worth deeply and refuses to let anyone diminish it again. The victim who once walked on eggshells now walks with steady steps, unafraid of losing someone who was never truly theirs. And the narcissist, stripped of the control they fed on, is left powerless, scrambling to regain what has already slipped through their fingers. They try anger, they try guilt, they try desperate affection, but none of it works because the empath has stepped into a new identity, the victor who no longer needs their validation. This shift is not just survival, it is transformation. It is the moment the empath rises, stronger than before, carrying scars not as signs of defeat but as proof of resilience. It is the moment they reclaim their voice, their energy, their life, leaving behind the role of victim forever. And in that rise, the narcissist faces their greatest defeat, the realization that the one they thought they had broken has become the one they can never touch again. The collapse of control is perhaps the most defining moment in the journey between the empath and the narcissist, a turning point where the very foundation of the narcissist's carefully constructed empire begins to fall apart piece by piece. For so long, the narcissist operates like a puppeteer, pulling strings with manipulation, charm, intimidation, and deceit, crafting illusions so convincing that those around them begin to doubt their own sense of reality. This power, however, is fragile, dependent not on genuine strength but on the compliance of others, and no one feeds that compliance more consistently than the empath. The empath, with their endless compassion, patience, and desire to see the good in everyone, often becomes the most valuable source of supply. The one who bends, who forgives, who absorbs insult after insult while hoping love can heal the wound. But here lies the irony. What the narcissist perceives as weakness in the empath is in fact a deep well of strength waiting for the right moment to awaken. And when that moment comes, when the empath finally refuses to play the game, the narcissist finds themselves stripped of the very power they believed was unshakable. The empire crumbles not with a dramatic explosion but with a quiet, steady dismantling. The empath no longer reacts to provocations, no longer chases after explanations, no longer bends beneath the weight of guilt or shame. Silence becomes their weapon, detachment their shield, and boundaries their fortress. Suddenly, the narcissist's cruel words no longer cut, their manipulations no longer twist, their control no longer lands. To the narcissist, this is nothing short of devastating. They thrive on reaction, on being able to stir chaos and watch as others scramble to appease them. Without reaction, they are left staring into a void, their control dissolving before their eyes. Every tactic that once guaranteed dominance now falls flat, like a magician whose tricks have been exposed under bright light. And as the empath grows stronger in their refusal, the narcissist grows weaker in their desperation. They may lash out, escalate, attempt to regain power with bigger threats or grander displays of false affection, but it is already too late. The spell is broken, the control is gone. This collapse exposes the truth that the narcissist's entire kingdom was never built on genuine respect, love, or loyalty, but on fear, manipulation, and dependency. Once that dependency is severed, the structure cannot stand. It begins to rot from within, leaving the narcissist grasping for dominance they can no longer command. Meanwhile, the empath rises from the ashes of their crumbling empire, not as a victim but as a survivor, a victor. Someone who has learned that true power lies not in controlling others, but in mastering one's own boundaries, one's own truth, one's own light. And it is in this collapse of control that the greatest shift decays. The narcissist, once towering and untouchable, is revealed as small, fragile, and powerless, while the empath, once underestimated and overlooked, stands in undeniable strength. The game is over, and the balance has finally shifted. Healing has always been the empath's quiet gift, though for the longest time it was poured into everyone else, especially into the bottomless pit that is the narcissist. For years, they gave, nurtured, soothed, and carried the weight of another's chaos, believing that love, patience, and compassion could fix what was broken. Yet with a narcissist, nothing is ever enough. No amount of love can satisfy a void that demands constant feeding, and no amount of sacrifice can calm the storms inside someone who thrives on control. When the empath finally steps back and begins to heal, something profound happens. The same love once wasted on the narcissist is redirected inward, becoming a force of restoration. They learn to rebuild piece by piece, reclaiming their sense of self, dignity, and worth. Every boundary they set, every truth they embrace, becomes a brick in the foundation of their new life. Healing is not quick, and it is not without pain, but it is steady. And with each step forward, the empath sheds another layer of manipulation, another chain of control. They begin to see that their compassion was never the problem. It was their misplaced belief that the narcissist could receive it genuinely. The moment that realization takes root, a new chapter begins. While the empath grows, the narcissist crumbles. For the narcissist, control is oxygen, admiration is food, and dominance is shelter. When deprived of those, they begin to starve. At first, they may rage, projecting blame, spinning lies, or desperately seeking new sources of supply. But beneath the surface of their theatrics lies a deep, gnawing emptiness, a fragility they've worked so hard to hide. The empath's healing highlights the contrast. One is moving toward wholeness, while the other is spiraling further into hollowness. Narcissists are not equipped to sit with themselves, to face the silence of a world that no longer revolves around them. Without someone to manipulate or an audience to applaud, their identity collapses. They chase external validation like a drug, but each dose loses its effect faster than the last. The very mask they crafted to project power begins to crack, revealing insecurity, bitterness, and despair. The downfall of a narcissist is not always dramatic. It is often a slow unraveling of the false self they've clung to for survival. For the empath, healing requires courage. It means confronting the pain they've ignored, acknowledging how much of themselves they lost while trying to save someone who never intended to be saved. It means forgiving themselves for staying too long, for confusing endurance with love, and for allowing someone else's needs to eclipse their own. But this forgiveness is liberating. With it comes clarity. They were never weak for caring. They were strong for surviving. The resilience that once enabled them to withstand the narcissist's chaos now fuels their journey toward wholeness. Healing is not only about recovery, it's about transformation. The empath who once felt small and trapped begins to walk with confidence, no longer apologizing for their sensitivity but embracing it as a gift. Their empathy becomes guided by wisdom, no longer handed out recklessly but shared with those who value it. This shift is the true victory. The empath does not just escape, they evolve. Meanwhile, the narcissist finds themselves cornered by their own emptiness. They may attempt to recreate the cycle with new victims, but each repetition carries less satisfaction. The patterns that once kept them powerful become stale, predictable, and ultimately self-destructive. Where the empath's growth breeds light, the narcissist's stagnation breeds darkness. What once looked like control now appears as desperation. What once looked like confidence now reveals itself as fragile arrogance. The narcissist's downfall is not caused by the empath's revenge, but by their absence. Without someone to mirror back their inflated sense of self, they are forced to confront the reality they've spent a lifetime avoiding, that beneath the mask lies nothing but fear and loneliness. In the contrast between the empath's healing and the narcissist's downfall lies a deeper truth. Energy cannot be destroyed, only redirected. The love, compassion, and strength the empath once gave to the narcissist now fuels their own rebirth. That same withdrawal of energy leaves the narcissist exposed, stripped of the fuel they once took for granted. It is almost poetic. The very qualities the narcissist mocked or exploited in the empath become the source of the empath's triumph, while the narcissist's reliance on deceit becomes the root of their undoing. The empath rises not because they seek to punish, but because they choose themselves. The narcissist falls not because someone destroys them, but because they cannot survive without control. This is the paradox of their dynamic. The empath's journey is ultimately one of freedom, while the narcissist remains chained to the very games they created. The empath learns, grows, and finds peace, while the narcissist remains trapped in the endless cycle of manipulation, feeding off others but never satisfied. In time, the empath will look back not with bitterness but with gratitude, for the experience that nearly broke them became the catalyst for their awakening. They emerge stronger, wiser, and more whole than ever before. The narcissist, however, remains stuck, searching for a new stage, a new audience, never realizing that their greatest downfall is the hollowness they carry within. And so, the story unfolds in two directions. The empath steps into a new life, healed and empowered, while the narcissist spirals into the emptiness they can no longer escape. It is not revenge, it is not punishment, it is the natural consequence of truth. Healing brings life, control breeds destruction. In the end, the empath's victory is quiet but undeniable, while the narcissist's downfall is loud yet inevitable. This is the ultimate irony. The one who was once silenced finds their voice, while the one who once demanded worship fades into irrelevance. And in that balance, justice is served, not by force, but by the undeniable power of healing. There comes a point in the story between an empath and a narcissist when the ending seems inevitable, but not in the way many might think. On the surface, it often appears that the narcissist is the one holding all the cards. They manipulate, they charm, they deceive, and for a time, they succeed in making the empath feel small, drained, and powerless. But that is only the beginning of the story, not the end. Because the very heart of an empath is not built on lies, fear, or dominance. It is built on something far greater: resilience, truth, and love. And that is why, no matter how dark the journey becomes, the empath always wins in the end. The empath's victory does not come overnight. It comes after battles fought in silence, after nights spent questioning their worth, after the endless cycle of giving, forgiving, and enduring. It comes when the empath finally recognizes that their compassion, their tenderness, and their ability to see the good in others has been used as a weapon against them. That realization hurts. It shatters illusions, breaks trust, and leaves scars. But hidden in that pain is a seed of awakening. The empath begins to see the truth. Their worth is not defined by someone else's validation. The light cannot be dimmed by another's shadow. And their heart is not meant to be chained by manipulation. The shift begins slowly, like a whisper. The empath starts setting boundaries, starts saying no, starts pulling back the endless supply of emotional energy that once fed the narcissist's ego. To the narcissist, this feels like betrayal, but in reality, it is freedom. For the first time, the empath is choosing themselves. They stop trying to fix the unfixable. They stop pouring their love into a bottomless pit. They stop believing the lies that kept them trapped. This choice is not made out of anger, but out of clarity. It is not revenge, it is healing. And in that healing lies true power. For the narcissist, the loss of control is unbearable. Their entire identity thrives on dominance, on extracting energy from others, on being the center of someone else's world. When the empath walks away, the narcissist spirals. They may lash out, they may smay, they may try to pull the empath back into the cycle, but it no longer works. Why? Because the empath has grown wise to the game. They see through the masks, the manipulation, the false promises. What once confused them now only confirms their decision to walk away. The narcissist, left without the empath's light to feed on, is forced to face their own emptiness. And that emptiness is something they cannot escape. The empath, on the other hand, begins to rebuild. It is not an easy path. Healing never is. But step by step, they reclaim pieces of themselves that were once given away. They rediscover joy in simple things, strength in solitude, and beauty in their own presence. They learn to love themselves the way they once tried to love the narcissist, fully, unconditionally, and with patience. This is where the real victory is found. Because while the narcissist remains stuck in cycles of illusion and desperation, the empath rises into a life of authenticity and peace. Winning, for the empath, is not about crushing the narcissist or proving them wrong. It is not about revenge or seeing them suffer. The empath's victory is far more profound. It is about reclaiming their soul, their peace, and their freedom. It is about walking away stronger, wiser, and more whole than ever before. They carry the scars, yes, but those scars tell a story of survival, of courage, of endurance. They are no longer victims of manipulation, but survivors who discovered their strength in the very fire that tried to consume them. And this is why the empath always wins in the end. Because narcissists may break illusions, but they cannot break the human spirit. They may steal time, energy, and trust, but they cannot steal resilience. They may try to bury the empath's light, but that light is eternal. It cannot be extinguished. The empath's love, once turned inward, becomes a force no narcissist can touch. That love rebuilds what was broken, heals what was wounded, and transforms pain into wisdom. In the end, the narcissist is left with their own emptiness, their endless need for validation, their unquenchable hunger for control. But the empath walks away free. They win not by dominating, but by refusing to be dominated. They win not by playing the game, but by stepping out of it entirely. They win because they choose themselves, their peace, and their truth over the endless chaos of someone else's illusions. So, if you have ever been broken down by the weight of a narcissist manipulation, remember this: your story is not over. Your ending is not theirs to write. You hold the pen now. And your ending, though it may come with pain, will always carry a victory they will never know. The victory of resilience, of healing, and of rising again. Because no matter how dark the storm, the empath always finds the light. And that is why, in the end, they always win. There comes a moment in the silent war between the empath and the narcissist where the balance of power begins to shift. For so long, the empath has endured, absorbing the manipulation, the lies, the gaslighting, the constant erosion of their reality. They've carried the weight of confusion, questioning their own worth, second-guessing every decision, and feeling as though they were walking through a maze designed to keep them lost forever. The narcissist thrives in that maze, carefully constructing walls of illusion, mirrors of deception, and doors that lead nowhere but back to the cycle of control. Yet, what the narcissist never anticipates is the hidden strength of the empath. Beneath the softness of their heart lies an unshakable resilience, a quiet fire that refuses to be extinguished. And when that fire ignites, the empath begins to see the truth. And once they see it, they cannot unsee it. This is where the mirror effect begins. The mirror effect is not about revenge. It is not about becoming like the narcissist. It is about reflection, about turning the very tactics once used to break the empath back toward their source, not with malice, but with clarity. An empath, at their core, does not seek destruction. They seek truth. But when that truth is held up like a mirror, the narcissist has no choice but to confront their own shadows. It is the one thing they spend their entire lives avoiding. The narcissist runs from themselves through domination, projection, and manipulation. They wear masks to cover the hollowness inside, convincing others, and even themselves, that they are powerful, desired, and untouchable. But the mirror strips away the mask. The mirror reveals the cracks. The mirror forces them to face the pain they've inflicted, the lies they've told, and the emptiness they've been hiding from all along. The empath learns this power almost accidentally. At first, they may try to reason with the narcissist, thinking honesty will soften them, thinking compassion will reach them. But over time, they begin to understand that their kindness is being weaponized against them. Their tears are used as tools for guilt. Their loyalty is twisted into chains. Their vulnerability is exploited as weakness. Slowly, painfully, the empath learns that the only way to survive is to step outside the maze. And when they do, they begin reflecting the narcissist's behaviors back at them, not through cruelty, but through boundaries and truth. When the narcissist gaslights, the empath stops engaging. When the narcissist projects, the empath calmly returns the projection. When the narcissist tries to instill doubt, the empath responds with unshakable clarity. This calm, steady reflection drives the narcissist to madness because it denies them what they crave most: emotional reaction, control, and supply. Imagine the narcissist hurling their usual weapons: blame, insults, accusations, expecting to pierce the empath's heart. But instead of tears, they see composure. Instead of apologies, they hear silence. Instead of doubt, they are met with confidence. It is as if every arrow they fire ricochets back, striking them instead. This is the mirror effect in its purest form. The empath no longer absorbs the poison but reflects it, making the narcissist choke on their own venom. But the mirror effect is deeper than silence or boundaries. It is psychological warfare turned back on the abuser, without the empath needing to lift a hand. For years, the narcissist has fed on the empath's emotional responses, thriving on their suffering. Without that fuel, the narcissist begins to unravel. They are forced to confront the gaping emptiness inside themselves, the very void they have spent a lifetime avoiding. Their manipulation no longer works. Their power begins to crumble. And for the first time, they are left staring at themselves. That is their greatest fear, because beneath the mask, there is nothing but fragility, shame, and insecurity. The empath, however, finds transformation in this stage. What once felt like weakness now reveals itself as strength. Their sensitivity becomes wisdom. Their compassion becomes discernment. Their forgiveness becomes freedom. By no longer carrying the narcissist's burden, they begin to heal. They see that reflecting the pain back was never about hurting the narcissist, but about showing them a truth they can no longer escape. Some narcissists will respond with rage, escalating their tactics in desperation. Others will retreat, unable to withstand the confrontation. But either way, the dynamic has shifted forever. The narcissist is no longer in control. And yet, here is the paradox. The empath does not always see their own victory at first. They may feel guilty for pulling away. They may question if their silence is cruel, if their boundaries are too harsh. But in reality, their strength is not cruelty. It is survival. It is reclaiming the dignity that was stolen, the identity that was blurred, and the light that was dimmed. The mirror effect is not about vengeance. It is about balance. For every lie the narcissist told, the truth now shines brighter. For every wound inflicted, healing begins. For every attempt at control, freedom is reclaimed. In the long run, the narcissist cannot survive in the light of this reflection. They either spiral deeper into denial, desperately seeking new sources of supply, or they collapse under the weight of the mirror's truth. Either way, the empath emerges stronger, not because they fought harder, but because they chose differently. They chose not to play the game. They chose not to absorb the poison. They chose to reflect. And in that choice, the narcissist's empire of control falls apart. That is why the mirror effect is so profound. It doesn't just end the narcissist's game. It reveals the truth of who they are and, more importantly, who the empath has become. A survivor, a warrior,